Before dawn on October 4th, 2025, the waters of Lake Onega were perfectly still. The stars shimmered on the surface like glass, and not a sound disturbed the fog-covered air. Deep inside Russia's Republic of Karelia, far from the front lines of the war, the massive Russian warship Grad sat anchored in silence. To its crew, this was the safest place on Earth, over 1,000 kilometers from any Ukrainian missile. They were wrong. At 4:31 a.m., the sirens began to wail. Red lights flashed across the deck. Confused sailors stumbled from their cabins, shouting over each other. This wasn't a drill or a system malfunction. It was an attack, one they never expected to come. Within minutes, the Russian Navy's pride, a $184 million Buan M-class missile corvette, was burning in what should have been its most secure harbor. Half an hour earlier, the captain had been asleep, confident that Lake Onega was untouchable. The lake sits at the heart of the White Sea-Baltic Canal, a 227-kilometer waterway connecting Russia's Arctic fleets to the Baltic Sea through St. Petersburg. The Kremlin had long considered it a backyard for its navy, a strategic artery linking northern bases, commercial ports, and nuclear submarines. To the Russian military, this was sacred territory, deep, hidden, and safe. But Ukraine had found a way to reach it. For months, Ukraine's signal intelligence units had been quietly scanning Russian military frequencies. Then, a strange discovery: encrypted transmissions from the Black Sea Fleet, but not from Crimea. These signals were coming from the northwest near Finland, a region that should have been radio silent. Kiev's analysts realized immediately that something important was being moved. Ukraine's satellite teams began scanning the canal using commercial imagery. It didn't take long. In the middle of Lake Onega, a ship appeared, its silhouette unmistakable. It matched the outline of a Buan M corvette. Soon after, a Ukrainian intelligence cell operating deep inside Russia confirmed the target's identity. The Grad, secretly transferred from the Black Sea to avoid Ukrainian strikes. To Moscow, it was hidden. To Ukraine, it was marked for destruction. This wasn't just another military target, it was a symbol. Hitting it would prove that nowhere inside Russia was safe. But the challenge was enormous. The skies over the canal were protected by S-400 surface-to-air missiles and Pantsir systems, forming one of Russia's most powerful air defense networks. A normal attack would be impossible. Ukraine needed to outsmart, not overpower, the defenses. For this mission, they chose the Luti, a long-range strike drone capable of traveling 1,200 kilometers and carrying a 75-kilogram explosive warhead. On paper, it looked small. In practice, it was a technological masterpiece. The Luti used 3 guidance systems, an inertial navigation unit that didn't rely on GPS, a jam-resistant receiver for precise correction, and an electro-optical infrared seeker that guided it in its final seconds. This drone didn't need pilots or constant communication. It thought for itself. But even the smartest drone couldn't survive against Russian radar alone. To clear the path, Ukraine deployed 2 Banshee LR electronic warfare drones. Their job was to act as decoys, flying higher and louder than Luti, emitting radar signals to draw Russian air defenses toward them. They would jam enemy radars, create false echoes, and make it look like an incoming wave of missiles, all while the real killer slipped silently beneath. The drones launched from a secret base in northern Ukraine before midnight, flying north through sparsely populated Russian airspace. Every minute of their journey was calculated. They flew through radar blind spots, hugging the terrain to stay undetected. After nearly 3 hours, a Russian Nebo M radar caught a faint trace over Tver Oblast. But within seconds, one Banshee fired a jamming pulse that filled the radar screen with static. The trace vanished. The Russians assumed it was a glitch. As the group neared Lake Onega, a Pantsir S-1 battery detected 2 unidentified targets, the decoys. The system locked on immediately. Believing they were protecting St. Petersburg, the Russian operators focused their entire defense on the false signals. Meanwhile, flying several kilometers behind and much lower, Luti glided unnoticed through the gap in the radar's lower zone. The decoys had done their job perfectly. At 4:30 a.m., Luti reached the lake, its final seeker activated, scanning the surface below. There, in the middle of the water, it spotted its target, The Grad. The ship's engines were off, but the metal hull still radiated heat. The drone's AI matched the thermal pattern stored in its memory. The target was confirmed. It began its descent. The sound came too late for the crew to react, a faint mechanical buzz growing louder by the second. Luti struck the ship's engine compartment, the weakest point in its armor. The 75-kilogram warhead detonated with surgical precision, tearing through steel and igniting the ship's fuel stores. Within seconds, secondary explosions ripped through the vessel as ammunition and fuel tanks went up in flames. The sky turned orange, and the quiet lake became a sea of fire. In a matter of moments, Russia's safe harbor had become a burning grave. The Grad, once a symbol of naval strength, was gone. What Ukraine destroyed that morning wasn't just a warship, it was a belief system. For centuries, Russia had relied on strategic depth, the idea that its vast geography would protect its core. From Napoleon to Hitler, invaders had always been crushed by distance and winter. But now, with drones and AI-guided missiles, distance no longer mattered. Ukraine had just proven that the war could reach the Kremlin's doorstep. Inside Russia, the psychological shock was immense. The elites of St. Petersburg, wealthy businessmen, politicians, and officials, had always seen the war as something distant, something happening to others. Their summer homes on Lake Onega, their yachts, their peaceful weekends by the water, all symbols of a life untouched by conflict, were now reminders of their own vulnerability. The war had arrived in their backyard. For the Kremlin, the attack created an impossible dilemma. Should it keep its limited S-400 and Panzer systems at the front, where soldiers were dying every day? Or pull them back to guard Russia's vast interior? If they defended the homeland, the front lines would collapse. If they protected the front, Ukraine could strike again, anywhere, anytime. It was a game with no winning move, a strategic trap. That single 75-kilogram explosion did more than sink a ship. It shattered the myth that Russia's size was its shield. In modern war, geography is no longer armor. It's a burden. Every base, every canal, every city is within reach. The destruction of the Grad was a warning written in fire. Even in the heart of Russia, there are no safe places left. As the sun rose over Karelia, smoke still curled above the lake. The ship's melted hull glimmered beneath the water. In Kyiv, Ukrainian commanders watched the satellite feed in silence. The mission had cost less than a fighter jet's single fuel run. For Russia, it had cost millions, pride, and the comfort of believing in safety. Somewhere over the horizon, another drone circled high above the clouds, its sensors quietly watching. The world had changed forever. In this new era of warfare, victory belonged not to those with the biggest armies, but to those who could outthink them.